Civil Service Commission hereby called to order. Roll call, please.
Ms. Aker? Vice Chairman Koss?
Present.
Chairman Ripka?
Present. Ms. Akers has a mandatory training class at her workplace, so she will not be able to attend today. Do I hear a motion to excuse the absence of Ms. Akers?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I will second that. We have a motion by Mr. Koss, seconded by Mr. Ripka. Roll call, please.
Vice Chairman Koss?
Yes.
Chairman Ripka?
Yes. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please read agenda item number 3 into the record.
Approval of the motion summary for the meeting held September 6, 2017 as recorded and transcribed.
If you haven't read the motion summary in advance, does any commission member wish to initiate any further discussion? If not, do I hear a motion to accept and approve the subject motion summary as recorded and transcribed?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve the motion summary as written.
And I will second it. We have a motion by Mr. Koss, second by Mr. Ripka. Roll call, please.
Vice Chairman Koss?
Yes.
Chairman Ripka?
Yes. Please read agenda item number 4 into the record.
Certification of Fire Lieutenant promotional list.
I yield the floor to Chief Donahue.
Thank you, and good afternoon. It looks like it's going to be a fire department day as far as the action-packed agenda that we have on today. Before you, we have is our recommendation for certification of the fire lieutenant's promotional list. This process followed the established promotional process, which began with a written test, followed by offer interviews, followed by an assessment center, which compiled, along with additional bonus points, the list that we have before you. We're asking to move forward with this certification. From there, I will have my interview with the candidates and a to the manager. We do currently have one position open.
So I understand that the previous list expired some time ago, so this is a brand new one for
It has, and actually, just for the commission's familiarity, we also, the last time we did an update of the lieutenants and also the captain's promotional list, we had actually added a promotional hold list. What can happen to allow us to facilitate a much faster process in filling open positions is the thought process is they knew we would end up having a written test, and the people on those lists would actually serve in an acting capacity. The primary people to fill those positions. But if a position came open from there, we would actually just move forward instead of having the 45-day study period, the written test that we need to schedule, as well as the advertisements and so forth. It would free us up between 2 to 3 months of time. So we added that up. So this is a new, fresh list, and in the near future, we'll be having the captain's promotional hold list. We do not have any positions open at this point in time. The promotional hold lists are not certified by the commission. They are just on hold, but we do present those to the Civil Service Commission so they are aware of it. I know we got a little outside of this promotional list, but I just wanted to make the commission aware of that since you have not been part of that process.
I appreciate that, yes.
So, Chief, just to make sure I understand, this is an actual promotional list. This is not a hold list.
This is an actual promotional list.
Okay. Thank you, Chief Donahue. Does any commission member have any further questions?
One from me.
Okay, do I hear a motion to accept and certify the fire lieutenant promotional list as presented?
So moved.
Okay, second by me. I will second that. So we have a motion by Mr. Koss, seconded by Mr. Ripka. Roll call, please.
Vice Chairman Koss?
Yes.
Chairman Ripka?
Yes. The motion carries. Please read agenda item number 5 into the record.
Recruiting process.
Okay, I yield the floor to Chief Donahue again.
Thank you. Before you is an update to the recruitment process from what was previously adopted. Before us, you see several of our firefighters. They were very instrumental in our process. I'd like to point out some of our guys that were part of that and really provided us some great feedback. We have, at that point in time, was our union president, Joe Murphy, was part of that. Our current union president, Zach Schaefer, was part of that. But also Clint Archangel was part of the process in which we had discussions with that. Just to give the commission history, in the former process, when we made the last update, it was a lengthy process, lengthy discussion with the commission, along with our union, on the process, and it really dealt with how to bring part-time personnel on in the role and so forth.
Was this in 2015?
Yes, it was. So, and I say yes, it was. I believe that was when it was, because we really started the part-time process in 2016. As a result of that, during the process, the commission at that point in time said that once a firefighter is hired, whether they're a full-time capacity or part-time capacity, they were hired by the city, and they came off the list. There were some concerns at the time pertaining to that was brought forth with us to ensure that the personnel that were hired and even came on board from the part-time to part-time or part-time to full-time were in the top 10. Because essentially what could have theoretically happened was, as we're hiring these part-time firefighters, somebody 15 on the list may not have been good enough or may not have been able to get on the full-time list at that time, but could have essentially been hired part-time, okay? Rolled off the list, but never made it in the top 10. Everybody following what I'm saying?
You got it. They could
So-
be against the same standards. However, if they went into the part-time, they may not have scored
High enough to be
sufficiently
high.
enough, and if you want the best of the best.
That's
then
exactly
they
right.
sneak through.
So through that, that was the concern that our firefighters, brought forth with us. So since that period of time, everybody that we have hired or transitioned from a part-time position up to a full-time position have been within the top 10. Even though they were not on the full-time or on that list, we always did that comparison, okay? But the concern existed there. And the thought process that also was brought forth was to essentially have two lists, a part-time list and also a full-time list. It was also our commitment that we would not, somebody that was part-time would not get any advantage over somebody that did not want part-time work for us. And it was ultimately all of our goal was to ensure that we hired the best person for the Delaware Fire Department and to serve our city. So having said that, I guess what Zach, probably about almost a year ago, Zach, and at that point in time, also Union President Jim Oberly, we sat down as a group with our Department of Administrative Services and started looking at the process that ultimately led to what we are going to be presenting today. So it was certainly a joint effort on all of ours, and I think we've addressed every single question and concern that the union had. And I think really the biggest thing, and probably the biggest person that really was the most outspoken, was Clint. I feel like I'm throwing you under the bus, but in the focus of having two separate lists. And that's what we have and we'll be presenting. So if you will just indulge me in just a few moments here, I'll go over the changes that have made, give a little bit of history pertaining to that. But this will ultimately lead into our next agenda, and that's the adoption of a full-time and also a part-time updated list, and really the establishment of the first part-time sole list, okay? So on page 1 before you on the recruitment process, the only change that was made on that was the date, and that was changed from the previous date now to October 2017. There was no changes procedurally in there. On page 2, the first change that is being identified, and you'll see that as 6H, is during the interview process, we've always asked the candidates what position are they looking at, either a full-time or a part-time position or both. But now what will end up happening, that will certainly define which lists are going to be going on, and it's very clear on when they need to provide us with that information. There's also with that a footnote that effective October 4th, which is today, 2 certified lists will be maintained for the positions of firefighter. The second change was on 7, and it's 7A. I think everybody's well aware of the paramedic requirements. That's 80% of our the work that we end up doing. We're proposing making a change that anybody that receives a paramedic certification, even after the list has been certified, can end up submitting to the Department of Administrative Services their update that they have become certified, at which time we will bring that before the Civil Service Commission to have those points added on. So it's not an automatic, it still needs to come before the commission for an update on that certification.
So the 5 points for the paramedic card, is that settled? I mean, there was some contention 2 years ago about whether it was too high, too low, whatever. Is that fine?
And I think we've always had some discussion and philosophy when looking at that. You know, the 5 points versus a 1, 2, 3 for an associates, bachelor's, doctors, military has always been, but there's no contention at this point in time with our point system. And the only change with the point system that is being changed is that you can submit for those paramedic certifications afterwards. Usually in the past, once the list was certified, you couldn't add anything, even if you became certified as a paramedic. So that's the only change that's happening.
Okay, so
nothing with the changes whatsoever.
So somebody gets on the list, they get their paramedic card, they come in and approve it, you come before us and we say they're good, up the score, and then you...
That is correct.
And
that modification will only be, it'll remain the same date time frame. So that person would roll off their normal time that they would have.
Right, no changes in the duration.
Correct. So the educational military points is on page 3 has also been changed, that those have to be submitted at the time of the panel interview too. There was question of when those needed to be, so we've clarified that. The next change is number 8, is that we will provide a full and part-time list for certifications to the civil service. So that's just continuing on with what we have said we've done, and now included that into the promotional process. And then number 9 is completion of a background assessment waiver, which we have been doing that as well. Okay. So
number 9's not really changed though.
No, it really hasn't. I think that was just somebody got happy, and I think the person that you're speaking or is speaking right now may have gotten a little happy with the highlighter.
I like yellow.
So process-wise, procedural-wise, those are the changes, but we've also provide clarification on the internal transfers. And these internal transfers will fully meet the civil service rules and the Rule of 10, and provides the clarity that we have talked to and the concerns that the local has had. So in order for somebody to transfer from a part-time position to a full-time, number 1, the part-time personnel must meet some of the following criteria. First, they currently have to be on the full-time list and within the Rule of 10, which is what our civil service criteria says. But let's say a full-time person is not on the full-time list. This is how they can go about it. 1, they must submit a written request to be added to the full-time list. Okay. 2, the internal candidate's original part-time overall score is then added to the eligible list for a period of 1 year. So what we're saying at that point in time is, if John Donnie was on the part-time employee, I was not on the full-time list, I would then submit a request to the Department of Administrative Services to be added to the full-time list. The score that I had, which is the process that regardless of whether you're full-time or part-time, you go through the same process. That score, which was certified on the list of part-time, would then be utilized for the full-time list, and you would be slotted in accordingly.
Do they have an opportunity to retest if there's
So
a reason higher?
we'll get into that in just a second. And then the updated eligibility list is presented to the Civil Service Commission. Now, to answer your question, yes, as part of number 8, let's say a person can't get into the top 10 for whatever reason, they can retest. Okay, they'll go through the entire process. Should they get a better score, that would then be their better score. Should they get a worse score, that'll be their worst score, or the score that they'll keep throughout the entire process from that point forward. And if they should fail, then they would fail the fire department because they're. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I got it.
Okay. So I think
If they do retest with a higher score, does their duration start from 0, their 1 year?
Yeah, it would restart with 365 days at that point in time.
Okay, yeah.
So Zach, I think I covered everything,
Yeah, I think so.
and that it was accurate from your point.
Makes sense to me, though.
So,
It really does.
but I think, again, I just want to thank our personnel for bringing this forward, working. I think we rolled up our sleeves. It's hard to believe it's been a year from this, but I say our personnel, but I'd also like to pay a huge thanks to our Department of Administrative Services, because this is going to put an additional burden on them, having 2 lists and tracking everything. So it's truly been a team effort. And Darren, I don't want to leave you out as well, but because you were certainly part of that.
You can leave me out.
But I think this is a huge accomplishment. It was one of the goals that we established from a labor management standpoint that we wanted to approach and get resolved. So.
No, I totally appreciate the line by line review. That was very, very helpful. I kind of got it all. I don't even have any further questions. I think my second question I was going to ask is pretty much already done. I was saying that the management rights and the bargaining agreement are the proposed changes to the firefighter recruitment process discussed with our union partners, and I see your head going. Okay. Thank you. Do you want to make any comments?
I don't have any further comments on that process.
Okay.
It's something that we've worked on for a while, and I think both sides are.
Yeah, I know it's a 2-year process. I know I got a little contention there at times, but I do appreciate your joining the forces here. Does the commission have any further questions?
No, you asked the only question I had.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to accept and approve the update of the firefighter recruitment process as presented?
So moved.
Seconded, I will second it. We have a motion by Mr. Koss, second by Mr. Ripka. Roll call, please.
Vice Chairman Koss,
Yes.
Chairman Ripka.
Yes. Motion carries. Please read agenda number 6 into the record.
Update of the firefighter certified list.
Thank you.
Back to me again, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Chief.
So as we process, now it's time to establish and update our list. As far as the full-time, with that, we're bringing forth some of the personnel that were, actually we had one individual that had never been on the full-time list, but had been on a part-time list, had been hired with us, now had requested to be moved on. So with that process, will be added to the full-time list based on their score, as we indicated before. There also were some part-time personnel that have and were requesting to be part of the full-time, but when they were hired by us, came off of it, they're now being put on, and that in their roll-off dates are commensurate with the original date that they ended up began with. So our recommendation is to move forward with this, with these 2 separate lists, and that will complete the update of our the work that both the fire and the labor have been working on.
So it looks like all of the candidates on the part-time list have been asked to put on the full-time list?
Yes, and that's not usually I think throughout the entire process, we've only had one candidate when they started the process not asked to go full-time, and that candidate actually has petitioned us to be put on the full-time list at this point in time. So they're essentially on it at this point in time.
Okay, so in column 4, going on down, you'll see edits that say PTEE 53117. Are they part-time employees right now who requested to be on the full-time list?
Correct.
It's like Watson, Alexander
Mhm.
Watson.
Correct. He is a part-time
The eighth one
employee
down.
right
Got
now.
it. So
and
they're already
that
on
is his
board.
hire date.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. One second. Okay, does any commission member have any further questions?
None at this time.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to accept and certify the full-time firefighter list as presented? This is the full-time. I'm asking for certification. Do I have a motion?
I will move to accept and certify the full-time firefighter list as presented.
And I will second it. So we have a motion by Mr. Koss, second by Mr. Ripka. Roll call, please.
Vice Chairman Koss,
Yes.
Chairman Ripka.
Yes, motion carries. Do I hear a motion to accept and certify the part-time firefighter list as presented?
We'll move to accept and certify the part-time firefighter list as presented.
I will second. So we have a motion by Mr. Koss, second by Mr. Ripka. Roll call, please.
Vice Chairman Koss,
Yes.
Chairman Ripka.
Yes, motion carries. Please read agenda item number 7 into the record.
Update of the firefighter physical agility validation.
Chief, you have the floor again.
Thank you. I think this is the last one I have, unless something else comes up in public comment and so
Still have
forth.
2 more pages now.
In 2015, as we were in the process of modifying our, or updating our process, one of the questions that came up, and I brought it up specifically, was about need to validate our physical agility test. And some of the items that we ended up having, I knew just didn't fit and created liability for us. So we discussed with the Civil Service Commission. Actually, I made a proposal to use 2 national testing processes. But ultimately, the direction that I ended up receiving from the Civil Service Commission was move forward with the validation of our test. And in 2016, as part of the budget process, I did receive funding for that, and we did move forward with this process. This was a joint venture between, again, the firefighters and the union. Actually, I believe, Zach, you went through the process, both from our old process and now with the new, as well as Chris. Joe, did you go through it? Clint did. And Joe, I don't think you did, but several of our personnel did and were part of that process. I know Matt, Lieutenant Kasich, was one of the ones that really took the lead on this. So having said that, Ergometrics was the company that we ended up hiring. And with that, went through a lengthy process of reviewing our job description. They flew out here, met with our personnel, took some metrics, actually witnessed one of our physical agility tests, and then witnessed our personnel going through, and actually the individual did a couple of the evolutions themselves. From there, they went back, analyzed the materials, and then presented us a report, which we'll be more than happy to share with the commission. But ultimately, what they ended up doing is making some recommendations, and the letter that I presented is to provide you with an update, because ultimately we'll end up coming back. There's still some work that we need to do. We're not looking at implementing this in 2017. This will be a 2018 project, but I did want to provide an update to the commission, because I believe it was one of those loose ends that we said that we would do, and we just haven't come back yet. But as I mentioned, there are some changes that we're going to be making with the agility test. The first one, if you look on the sheet, is dealing with the aerial ladder climb. And again, this goes back to the fire service's sort of resistance to some type of changes. And I say that because there's a adage of 200 years of tradition unimpeded by progress, which I can actually say is a joke, because if you look at our firefighters, if you look at the equipment that we carry and the job we do, it is completely changed from the way we do it. But we don't like to change unless there's a valid reason for that change. But having said that, our aerial ladder climb was based on our old ladder truck. And our old ladder truck would only go 85 feet up. While we've maintained over the process of maintaining the 85 foot, even though our ladder's 100 foot, the time is now to change and make that modification. So we're going to keep that evolution. I was recommending keeping that, but we're going to modify that from an 85 foot to a 100 foot ladder.
You're making it harder?
That's not actually harder.
Well, I did that. That was hard. Sorry.
The second change is the point of the 2.5 charged hose line. It's not that we don't pull a 2.5 inch charge line, because we do, but it's more common for us to use the 1.75 inch charged hose line. We're going to be modifying that a little bit from what they had proposed, because they just made the modification based on the 2.5, changing the size, but the actual line that we end up using is a 200 foot line versus a 100 foot line. So we're going to make that modification. So we'll be working with our personnel on both of those items to establish the exact time that needs to be, those need to be set up for. The other changes that were recommended, if you go halfway down the chart, you'll see sandbag. We previously had a 125-pound sandbag that they had needed to lift out of a bathtub and go through a obstacle. That's being changed. I think all of us would love to be 125 pounds, but in reality, that's not what the going weight is of a typical adult. But what has become the standard as far as the drag has been a 165-pound mannequin, which we've purchased. We've gone through the assessment. I think the guys think this is a pretty challenging use of the mannequin, but the mannequin will need to go through a 100-foot obstacle course. The next change, the 500-yard shuttle has been removed. It's been replaced by the hose hoist, which is hoisting a hose up a specific height. The next one is the bent knee sit-ups has been removed. And here we've gotten into a little bit of a reordering where the gas mask is now, instead of the next to last, is the third from the last, followed by the B, a new component, and that's a CPR. It's a 2-minute or 2.5-minute event that the personnel, and as I mentioned, we go through 80% of our responses are medical responses. We felt we needed to add that and concurred with their recommendation. So those are the modifications that are being made. I also want to talk a little bit about the scoring. And one of the changes that was a point-tiered system. We are not recommending that at all at this point in time. We are just going to continue through 2018. We'll continue to evaluate it if we need to. Obviously, we can still come forth to the commission. But with that, we're still with our you either pass all the events or you fail. And so the scoring times that you see listed here are the same scores or time limits that they identified as their ideal time frames, okay? Because they gave an ideal in their tiered system, you get 1 point. If you exceeded that to a certain, you got 0 points, so you continue on with the process. At this point in time, I've eliminated that 0, and we've just established the scoring times based on the ideal. So I wanted to let the commission know about that. I can tell you our guys have gone through this process. I think they feel that it is a very challenging physical agility test. I know questions have been raised, how is this compared to the CPAP and the firefighter mile that other agencies have used or national testing. And I think taking myself and my firefighters out of that, it's been well stated from our candidates who have come through the test, saying that ours is a very challenging test, but they've been happy to be a part of it, even those that have failed it. And I think, DAS has been there. Some of our guys have been there and heard those same comments. So I think it is a very valid test that is now being validated as well. A couple other items that I would like to point out. They've also listed a couple other things for consideration. One, trying to keep everything in a constant, set established environment is one of the. So if there's a way to conduct these tests indoors, they prefer us to do that. But I can tell you that becomes a challenge because I don't know of any building that we could end up setting up our ladder and climbing up 100 feet with that. So we will certainly look and see, and if there's a way that we can end up making those modifications, we'll certainly bring that forth that as well. But I think I think we all understand that's a little bit of a challenge. And we're also going to continue working on our instructions, and that's why I don't want to start it in 2017. One of the things that the ergometrics recommended is that you go with a set verbiage that every candidate gets, and that's all they get, which I know is a little disheartening to a certain extent for all of us, because at times our guys have really rooted the candidates on, pushed them. It became one of those motivational factors. But at the same time, ergometrics said, well, if you give it to one and don't give it to other, that becomes a potential
Disparate treatment kind of thing?
Yes. So we'll be working on that. And, if there's a way that we can put something in there that, all right, X amount of seconds left, we'll look at doing that to try to assist as best we can, but understanding that it's going to be even and consistent across the board. And then finally is any modifications, or we've already made this final modification, but we used to take a pool of candidates, whether there was 3, 4, or 5, or how many ever showed up for that time slot, because sometimes others wouldn't show up. We take them through the process. So you may have a group that may end up starting out with 3, 4, or 5. You may have somebody fail out in that. Now you even get less than that. And it became a little bit inconsistent because there was different break times in between events. We recognize that, and it already made the change that every candidate was going to be the single and only candidate going through the process. So we've already implemented that. We recognized that need for a change. So in conclusion, we're going to continue to work. We'll get the rest of the dates, I shouldn't say dates, but the times established for these. I will also send out the ergometrics study, so you guys can review it. But I think all in all, I think everybody's pretty happy with what was presented to us, and we stand behind the validation of this certification.
Chief, I'm sorry. I just thought it might be helpful if the chief could explain a little bit more why validation is important, because I don't think any of these commissioners were on the commission in terms of relating to the actual job and potential challenges to the test. I know you're familiar with that, Chief.
So I think we've all seen and been aware of lawsuits that have occurred from testing and hiring process. And I go back to well before I was even here. I think anybody here in our audience, but one of the physical agility points of the past was you had to sit in the truck and your head couldn't touch or be within so many inches of the roof of the cab on that. And it was funny because now we're limiting instead of capability, but your height requirement. Essentially what we're doing is ensuring that what we're testing the candidates on are actual job performance requirements, things that our firefighters are required to do. And we're also looking at the timeframes that are nationally expected and have been tested based on our personnel here. So the people have looked at our job description, they validated and looked at the job that we end up doing and applying the standards of the jobs that we're testing for, meet those requirements and are a fair time frame and not just arbitrarily pulled out. And that's the reason for that, as I go back, is we do not want to be just disproportionate or disparately disqualify somebody because it wasn't a fair test. And by bringing in a third party that specializes in this, validates and provides credibility to the test that we're using. So it's not Chief Donahue saying that this is what he feels is the time. This is a time-tested and reviewed process. Somebody standards as far as how tests should be validated.
So this is a work in process.
Yes.
More to come on that thing. That's good. I certainly don't have the expertise to comment on the individual pieces of it, but when you're finished, would you say that your test standards would meet or exceed the normal national testing standards?
Well, I hate to answer that question because one thing that I have always said to my personnel is I don't care what the national standards are. I'm more focused on what is right for the City of Delaware and Delaware Fire Department. And I think that's why the Civil Service Commission said we need to move forward with our test. We didn't test the national standards. We tested what our experience was and what our firefighters need to be here. Now, having said that, one of the questions that was posed is, looking at those national standard tests in comparison to ours, I said the candidates even admitted ours is a much more challenging test. But I think at the same time, they're saying it's a much more valid and applicable test that we've had here too. So I hope that answers.
No, that's good enough. Yeah,
It might be helpful to add on as well. We certainly don't want to get in the language of saying we exceed tests, because again, we don't want a test that's harder than what the job actually is, because then a candidate who is unsuccessful could say you're weeding out people like me because you went so far above what is required for the job. So you really want that good fit where it is able to test that they can do the job, but not so hard it has nothing to do with the job, like Chief's,
It's
hitting
good
the
to
head
have
on
a
the
third party
time.
come in and validate that.
And-
But validation also applies to the police department. The physical agility, does it?
With the police department, we tied our physical agility portion to the, is it the Highway Patrol's Academy, Chief?
It's Ohio Basic Peace Officer entry-level requirements for academies.
And while that's not validated in the same way where that academy and what they need to get into the academy, so in that respect, it is tied to the job, because if they can't meet the minimums to even show up at the academy, they can't go through the academy. So it's validated in a different kind of way.
So it's on the Ergometrics website, checking them out kind of thing, and they're pretty reputable. But they did mention a large Midwest city whose police department did not have their test standards validated. And then that just kind of caught my eye over there. I had to ask the question though. But my only other question was whether we had discussed it with the union partners, and I believe that those heads going up and down the answer. That's great. Yeah. Well, that's good. It's very nice to see the management and the unions collaborate like that. I'm very happy.
And not only did we just collaborate, they actually physically did that.
They kind of go through it. So.
So
That's very good. That's very good. Thank you very much for that. Does the commission member have any other questions?
I do not.
Okay, do I hear a motion to accept and approve the update to the firefighter physical agility validation as presented?
Move to approve the update.
I will second this. We have a motion on Mr. Cost, second on Mr. Ripka. Roll call, please.
Vice Chairman Cost?
Yes.
Chairman Ripka?
Yes. Okay, the motion carries. Anything from the public, even though you're more specialized public than normal? All right.
Chairman,
Let's have a couple of little follow-up things.
I have something too, Chairman, when
Yes,
you're done with your follow-up, or whatever.
Yeah, go ahead, Chief.
I'd just like to introduce everyone to Elizabeth Mattoon, who is one of our attorneys in our prosecutor's office, and she has expressed an interest in going beyond criminal prosecution and getting involved in HR law, so I thought it'd be helpful for her to
Super
come
welcome.
along. So I just want to introduce everyone to her.
Anytime.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Just a couple.
Ms. Mattoon and I are acquainted.
Is that good or bad?
That sounded very ominous.
We've been at bar together. We'll say that.
Okay, just a couple little questions that came to my mind as I read through things. Chief Pijanowski, President Trump announced in August his intent to restore a program where he sends surplus military weapons and equipment to state and local law enforcement agencies. Is that something your department can take care of or take advantage of?
We've actually been a participant for a long time in the
That's good.
1033 program. When it got shut down, we were essentially shut down, and the state of Ohio is currently not open. I think it will be closed till sometime next year, but we typically have received benefits from the 1033 program. A lot of computer equipment, a lot of furniture, protective equipment like eye protection, knee pads, weight room equipment. So a lot of stuff that doesn't make it into the newspaper, but a lot of benign stuff that's actually saved the city a lot of money that we've been able to
that's
use.
what
So we do actually.
That's very good. I was reading in August also, I guess it was in the either Dispatch or the Delaware Gazette, about the Pinkerton police chief on record stating the need is dire for more officers. What they were citing on the east side of the city is population growth, which we're experiencing, uptick in crime due to drug problems and overall demand for services. Not to be specific, but do you anticipate requesting any additional resources in your 2018 budget?
I will request resources. How that will look, I don't know yet. It's still really, really early, and we're a growing city, so every department really has the same growth issues, and we all drink from the same pond. So we try and work well together. But, I do have some potential propositions.
So you compete for funds with everybody else in the department, but Chief, you're on a levy, so you're pretty well independent as long as the duration of that time. Good.
I think it's,
So, Counselor, is there any restrictions on this committee or this commission that would prevent us from supporting the chief's budget submission? It doesn't really mean too much in terms of actually what happens, but symbolically requesting priority consideration for the resources for the city safety workforces. It goes a long way in our mind.
It's not part of the commission's official job, so to speak, but you are public officials, and you certainly have an entitlement to make your opinions known. So I think if you want to say, hey, we as a commission think this is important based on, I don't think there'd be a problem with that. But as you said, you don't have any, you can make them, but people submit letters all the time about, hey, I want to do some construction on this road, or this project's important to me. So I think to the extent you are citizens and you probably have a little bit more knowledge based on your roles, I think that would be appropriate. Am I missing it? Jess, do you agree or anything? Or?
No, I was just going to supplement by saying, the benefit of having Jim here as well, and communicating that back to City Council and serving as the on this commission.
Yeah, you can always sit in testimony when they do a reading of the budget too.
And if you wrote a letter, we would make sure either Elaine or I sure that gets submitted to council too.
Okay.
While you're at it, if you could talk about a triple increase in the legal budget, I would appreciate.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Well, I live budget and finance in Washington, D.C., and when the appropriators go to mark up appropriate bills, the letters come from every nook and cranny in the country and overseas, believe me.
But I also pay taxes in the city, so.
No.
There you go. Okay. The city's police department partnered with OWU, that's Ohio Wesleyan University, their Department of Public Safety, this past Saturday at Soldy Stadium in support of the OWU Bishop Backers' first ever community day. So the public enjoyed free access to all the sporting events. There was, let me see, we were in line of sight with the field hockey team and the football team. And the most generous cookout was manned by our own city police and OWU's public safety workforce. So Chief, I know I saw you there. Would you like to say a couple words? Because it's the first one ever. I think it went over pretty well.
Sure, that was really the result of a number of things going on with the police department. First is we instituted and selected and put into position a community impact officer. That's Officer Sean Franks, and his job is just to create opportunities for officers in the department to have non-enforcement interaction and just kind of positive interactions with the public and with the community. And Wesleyan's a big part of our community, so one of the things he did was propose for Community Day, we do a big tailgate party at the football game between football, field hockey, and the other events. So we moved forward with that, worked with public safety and Ohio Wesleyan on setting that up and grilling a bunch of hot dogs and brats. So it was a good event, and it's part of the bigger philosophy. What we're trying to do as a department is do things a little bit differently, connect a little bit more with the community to try to combat some of the negative stereotypes and media reports that are out there about law enforcement today, because locally we're different and we want people to know that.
Yeah, and I think it's commendable that you guys can engage on that. And Chief Donahue, Friday is y'all's time to shine with fire safety, right? So you can have all the fire cars and everything out there, kid activities, etc.
Absolutely, and I guess.
I'm gonna be there.
Well, we welcome you and everybody. Actually, our risk reduction division is taking care of that. Actually, Zach is part of that. It'll actually be Unit 1 that's going to be on duty that day, but I know the guys have worked very hard, and we'll have several activities. Unfortunately, we're not going to be doing any live fire burns. It's very difficult with the EPA requirements. I know there's been a couple.
That kind of rose my eye.
And we actually have done some downtown, but needless to say, we'll be doing. We have 2 vehicles that will be doing electrifications on. We have our ladder truck set up. There'll be some rappels off of that. Certainly, the vehicles will be on display. Some activities for the kids, and then on the middle block. We'll have some of our partnering agencies, the Red Cross, Salvation Army, 911, Emergency Management, and also we'll have an antique fire engine. Bill Williams from Williams Insurance will have his vehicle here as well. So it's always a great time, great turnout, and I think you get free pumpkins too. Yeah.
Okay, so on a lighter note, I noted in July, this past summer, that Delaware County ranked 9th in the happiest places in America, according to smartasset.com. So now the city of Delaware just recently ranked number 71 on Money's best places to live in the United States and ranked number 29 in the Midwest, which I think is pretty good because there are thousands of cities going across the country. So reiterating the mayor's tremendous debt of gratitude to our city employees, I'd like to take this opportunity to specifically thank our safety workforces, which is the firefighting and the police.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if there's any other commission comments? If not, there being no further business to conduct, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Koss, second by Mr. Ripka. Roll call, please.
Vice Chairman Koss,
Yes.
Chairman Ripka.
Yes, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Just once, I'd love somebody to say no on.
Yeah, you
adjournment.
could have really thrown for a loop.